A desert city of 30,000 people thrived where no water should exist. Petra's true wonder is not the famous treasury facade, but a hydraulic masterpiece carved within the cliffs. An ancient Nabatean inscription declares, "Water is life," a belief they engineered into reality. By the end, you will understand the precise systems that turned a barren canyon into a sustainable metropolis, revealing a lesson in resilience we desperately need today. How did they capture destructive floods to fuel a civilization, and what hidden tunnels still guard their secrets? When you see what humans can build in partnership with a harsh world, does it change your idea of what is possible? Petra was once described as a place of lush gardens and abundant water, a green jewel in a sea of stone. Today, it appears as a magnificent ruin baked by a relentless sun, surrounded by a landscape of breathtaking but brutal aridity. This is the desert paradox. How could a city of 30,000 souls, a thriving commercial and cultural capital, possibly survive here, let alone flourish for centuries? The answer lies not in changing the desert, but in a profound understanding of its harsh rhythm. The Petra Basin is a natural geological bowl encircled by sheer, rose-red sandstone cliffs. It sits in what is now southern Jordan, part of a hyper-arid desert belt where annual rainfall is measured in mere inches, and those precious inches do not fall gently. They arrive in furious, unpredictable bursts. The very geography that provided Petra with natural fortification also created a hydrological nightmare. When rain did fall on the surrounding highlands, it would funnel through narrow canyons or sikhs, gathering terrifying speed and volume before exploding into the basin as catastrophic flash floods. These floods could erase years of work in minutes, scouring the landscape and leaving only destruction in their wake. Archaeologist Lee Ann Bedal has described the site's natural water regime in exactly those terms, a nightmare. Yet the Nabateans saw something else. They looked at this cycle of scarcity and violence and recognized a single, untapped resource. Water was here, just not on their terms. It was either absent or apocalyptic. Their genius was in realizing that the desert's greatest threat was also its only gift. The fundamental puzzle they faced was immense: how to capture, control, and conserve these sporadic, violent deluges to provide a steady, life-giving supply for thousands of people throughout the year. This was the scale of their ambition. To build a civilization here meant engaging in a constant, sophisticated dialogue with the elements. It prompts a deeper question, one that resonates far beyond archaeology. What does it mean to build not in spite of a harsh environment, but by mastering its most destructive and scarce element, to turn a force of chaos into the very foundation of order? The sound of a desert storm is a promise of both salvation and ruin. In the highlands surrounding Petra, a sudden downpour does not soak gently into the earth. It sheets across the bare rock, gathering momentum with terrifying speed. Within minutes, what was a bone-dry riverbed, a wadi, becomes a roaring, chocolate-brown torrent, a wall of water and debris capable of scouring the landscape down to bedrock. This was the chaotic, violent heartbeat of the desert, and the Nabateans chose to listen. Their first and most audacious principle was to not just survive these flash floods, but to harness them. They looked at that destructive power and saw their primary water source. To achieve this, they had to think like watershed engineers on a grand scale. The entire basin of Petra, with its surrounding cliffs and plateaus, formed a natural catchment area of over 80 square kilometers. Every drop of rain that fell within that vast area would eventually funnel toward the city. The goal was to intercept, divert, and most importantly, slow that water down. Hydrologist Dr. Charles Ortloff, who has extensively studied Petra's systems, explains a key concept they mastered: peak flow attenuation. In simple terms, it means reducing the speed and power of floodwater at its peak. You do not fight the flood with a single, massive wall. You gently persuade it to lose its fury. The Nabateans did this with a network of low, wide dams strategically placed across the wadis. These were not dams designed to create permanent lakes, which would quickly evaporate under the desert sun. Instead, they were cleverly engineered speed bumps. As the floodwater hit these barriers, its velocity dropped dramatically. Heavy sediments, the rocks and silt carried in the raging flow, settled out behind the dams. The now slowed, cleaner water was then given time to do the most valuable thing possible in a desert. It infiltrated. It seeped down through the gravel beds of the wadi floor, recharging the groundwater aquifer, a natural underground storage tank protected from the evaporating heat. This was proactive flood management as a form of creation. Each dam transformed a moment of catastrophic chaos into a controlled, deliberate act of resource capture. The destructive peak of the flood was attenuated, its energy dissipated, and its life-giving potential safely tucked away beneath the sand. This was the critical first link in a brilliant chain, turning the desert's most fearsome event into the first step toward sustaining a city. But capturing the floodwaters was only the beginning of the story. A single drop of rain, after surviving the torrent, still faced a perilous journey across a sun-baked landscape where evaporation claims everything. The Nabateans understood that to win in the desert, you cannot waste a single molecule. Their second foundational principle was an obsession with capture and conveyance, a relentless effort to guide every possible drop from where it fell to where it was needed. Think of a raindrop striking a high cliff face miles from the city center. Left to nature, it would evaporate instantly or vanish into the sand. The Nabatean engineers gave that drop a path, a purpose. They turned the entire city basin into a vast, sloping catchment device. Their network began with the cliffs themselves. They carved small, shallow gutters and collection channels directly into the sandstone to intercept rainwater runoff before it could be lost. They tapped into the few natural springs that emerged from the rock, and they even captured the slow, steady seepage of groundwater from the canyon walls. This water from every conceivable source was then fed into an arterial system of masonry conduits. These were not open ditches, but carefully constructed, plaster-lined channels, often built right into the cliff faces or cleverly hidden along canyon rims. They were the city's lifelines, and they operated on one flawless, unchanging principle: gravity. The gradient of each channel was calculated with astonishing precision, a decline so gentle it is almost imperceptible, yet steep enough to keep the water moving steadily toward the city's heart. To achieve this without levels or lasers required an intuitive mastery of landscape that is difficult to fathom. Along the way, the engineers incorporated brilliant features. Small settling basins allowed sand and debris to fall out of the flow, keeping the channels clear. Critical sections were covered with stone slabs, a simple but effective shield against the evaporative power of the desert sun. We can see this artistry in the system that fed the great temple complex. Channels originating from springs and catchment areas over a kilometer away were woven through the rugged terrain, maintaining their perfect slope to deliver water directly to the temple's ritual pools and gardens. This was not haphazard construction, it was hydrological symphony. Each channel was a deliberate act of persuasion, convincing water to defy the desert's logic of scarcity and loss. By gathering these scattered, vulnerable sources into a directed, protected flow, the Nabateans performed a kind of alchemy. They transformed chance into certainty, creating a reliable utility that could be managed and measured. This engineered journey from cliff face to city center set the stage for the final and most ingenious act of their water mastery. The most dramatic entrance to any city on Earth begins with a walk through a crack in the world. The Sick is a natural geological fault, a winding, kilometer-long canyon so narrow in places that the towering rose-red walls seemed to close overhead, leaving only a sliver of sky. Visitors today walk this path in awe, anticipating the first glimpse of the treasury facade. But for the ancient Nabateans, this was not merely a ceremonial gateway. It was the city's main artery, a covered aqueduct of staggering ambition. They transformed this natural fissure into a monumental piece of utility, carved directly into the base of the canyon walls, running almost the entire length of the Sick, was a meticulously engineered water channel. In some sections, they even built dual channels, one on each side, a redundancy that speaks to the critical importance of this flow. This was not an open trench. The channel was often lined with waterproof plaster and, in its most advanced sections, featured ceramic pipes set within the stonework, an innovation that further reduced loss and contamination. At regular intervals, smaller channels branched off from this main line, climbing the canyon walls through carved openings to feed cisterns and distribution points for the neighborhoods perched above. The Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, the first Westerner to rediscover Petra in 1812, noted these features with astonishment, describing the remains of pipes and conduits that once carried water through the heart of the rock. The design was brilliantly protective. The towering walls of the Sick provided constant shade, shielding the water from the evaporative desert sun for most of the day. The narrow, winding path minimized wind, further reducing evaporation. It was, in effect, a covered, secure pipeline millennia before modern civil engineering conceived of such a thing. Contamination from animals or debris was virtually impossible. Every step through that sublime canyon was quite literally a walk alongside the city's lifeblood. This fusion is the essence of Nabatean genius, where profound beauty and profound utility are not separate ideas, but one and the same. The Sick was their ultimate statement, a declaration that infrastructure could be sacred and that survival itself could be sculpted into something breathtaking. Yet for all their genius in moving water, the desert's ultimate test was time. The true measure of a civilization in such a place is not how it handles a flood, but how it endures the long, silent stretches between them. This leads us to the Nabateans' third and perhaps most vital principle, the art of storage and conservation. If their channels were the city's arteries, then its heart was hidden deep underground in a network of secret subterranean vaults. After guiding every precious drop through miles of rock, they faced the final challenge, convincing it to stay. The search for these hidden cavities reveals an obsession with the future. They knew survival meant banking water like treasure, saving it for the inevitable drought periods that could last for months. The result was an astonishing array of cisterns, from monumental public reservoirs to modest household tanks, all engineered to defy evaporation and seepage. Near the Grand Theatre, archaeologists have uncovered vast, bell-shaped cisterns carved directly into the bedrock, capable of holding hundreds of thousands of gallons. These were public utilities, ensuring the community had a buffer against scarcity. But storage was also a private, domestic science. In the ruins of wealthy Nabatean homes, you often find a telltale feature, a courtyard with a circular opening leading down into a cool, dark chamber. These were private cisterns, plaster-lined tanks that collected rainwater from the rooftops and courtyards of individual families. This distributed network meant resilience was built into the very fabric of the city, from the civic scale down to the household level. The magic that made these tanks possible was a Nabatean specialty, a remarkably durable waterproof plaster. Conservation architect Giora Sola has studied its composition, revealing it was made from a mix of lime and crushed pottery, or terra cotta. This was not a haphazard recipe, it was advanced materials science. The crushed pottery acted as a pozzolanic agent, creating a chemical reaction that made the plaster set harder and become virtually impermeable over time. They were creating a synthetic, watertight skin inside the living rock, Each cistern, once sealed with this plaster, became a sealed vault, a time capsule for liquid. The scale is difficult to overstate. Some of the larger public reservoirs could hold enough water to supply thousands of people for weeks. This capacity transformed Petra's relationship with the desert. No longer were they at the mercy of the next cloudburst. They had created a hydrological battery charged by the sporadic floods and slowly discharged over the dry seasons. The city now possessed a hidden heartbeat, a slow, steady pulse of reserved life that turned a precarious existence into a stable oasis. It prompts a quiet reflection. What does it mean to build a civilization that thinks not in seasons, but in generations, that looks at a barren cliff and sees not a barrier but a bank vault for the future? The modern town of Wadi Musa, the Valley of Moses, now greets visitors before they enter the ancient city. But this valley has always been the main channel for the desert's fury. The Nabateans knew that to protect Petra, they had to master this specific watercourse first. Their solution was not a single barrier, but a coordinated network of diversion dams, a staged defense system that turned a destructive river into a managed resource. The most famous of these structures once stood right at the mouth of the Sick, the city's sacred entrance. Today, only its foundations and a later Roman reconstruction hint at its original scale. This was no simple wall. It was a massive, curved dam built from large, mortared stone blocks, engineered to withstand tremendous pressure. Its purpose was elegantly dual: to defend the city's heart and to redirect its lifeblood. When a flash flood roared down the Wadi Musa, this dam did not attempt to stop it completely, an impossible task. Instead, it acted as a colossal traffic director. The main force of the flood was shunted away from the vulnerable entrance to the Sick and into a man-made escape route, a diversion tunnel carved straight through the adjacent cliff. This tunnel, a marvel in itself, safely channeled the dangerous surplus water around the city and into a secondary valley. But the dam's genius did not end with defense. A system of sluice gates and secondary channels allowed a controlled portion of the gentler, sediment-rich flow to be released onto the broad plains flanking the Wadi. Here, the water was spread across meticulously constructed agricultural terraces. This is where the network concept becomes clear. Upstream from this main dam, a series of smaller, earlier dams were strategically placed. Their job was peak flow attenuation, to take the first brutal impact of the flood, slow it down, and let heavier debris settle out. By the time the water reached the dam at the Sick, it was already partially tamed. The entire network operated like a multi-stage filter and distribution system. The first dams blunted the flood's power. The main dam defended the gate and split the flow, and the diverted water then nourished the fields that fed the city. It was a seamless integration of urban defense and rural sustenance. This network was Petra's first and most critical line of defense, but it was never just a wall against disaster. It was the mechanism that transformed a threat into fertility, ensuring that every flood, no matter how violent, left behind not just safety but the promise of bread. A city of 30,000 cannot live on water alone. The true test of Petra's hydraulic genius is measured not in the gallons stored within its cisterns, but in the food grown upon its barren slopes. The Nabateans did not simply conquer the desert for survival. They persuaded it to bear fruit, surrounding the city center, on hillsides that appear today as nothing more than eroded rock and dust. A vast agricultural landscape once thrived. They transformed these impossible gradients into a cascading series of stone-walled terraces, a monumental staircase of fertility carved directly into the mountainside. Each terrace was a level platform held in place by a dry stone retaining wall, a structure that did far more than prevent erosion. It created a deep, stable bed of soil where none existed naturally, capturing every speck of wind-blown silt and organic matter. This was the canvas upon which they painted their green revolution, But soil without water is just another kind of desert. To bring these terraces to life, the Nabateans extended their hydraulic network into a fine capillary system. Small, branching channels diverted water from the main conduits and dams, guiding it down across the stepped slopes in a controlled, gravity-fed trickle. The water would enter a terrace at its highest point, slowly percolate through the soil, and any excess would flow through a carefully placed spillway to the terrace below, ensuring not a drop was wasted. This was runoff farming perfected. Agricultural archaeologist Jennifer Ramsay explains that the Nabateans mastered the art of directing even the scant, sporadic rainfall that fell directly on these slopes. They designed their terrace walls and soil beds to capture every possible millimeter of local precipitation, channeling it directly to the root zones of their plants. The result was a verdant, productive hinterland. Paleobotanical evidence, the study of ancient plant remains, tells us what flourished here. Charred seeds and pollen grains recovered from the soil reveal vineyards yielding grapes for wine and raisins, orchards of olives and figs, and plots of barley and wheat. These were not subsistence crops alone, they were cash crops. The surplus from these terraced gardens could be dried, pressed, or milled, then traded along the very caravan routes that made Petra wealthy. This agricultural layer completed the city's masterpiece. It turned their water management from a defensive utility into an economic engine. The hydraulic system that defended the sick also irrigated a vineyard. The dam that diverted a flood also nourished an olive grove. Their mastery was holistic, viewing water, food, and commerce as interconnected strands of a single, resilient system. It makes you look at a barren slope and wonder, what other barren places in our world are not truly empty, but simply waiting for someone to see the potential hidden within their harsh geometry. Walking through the ruins of the garden pool complex, you are met with a profound contradiction. Here, archaeologists uncovered the remains of an elaborate, terraced garden complete with a large, central pool, an island pavilion, and a sophisticated network of channels and fountains. In the heart of a desert, this was a staggering display of conspicuous consumption, a lush paradise engineered purely for beauty and leisure. Yet to label it merely a royal pleasure garden misses a deeper truth. For the Nabateans, the very act of controlling water, of making it flow and cascade and nurture life in a place of death, was itself a sacred act. This complex and sites like it reveal the inseparable bond between hydraulic engineering and spiritual belief. Water was not just a physical resource, it was a divine gift, a manifestation of the gods' favor. Their chief deity, Dashara, was often associated with mountains and the life-giving forces within the earth, while the goddess Al-Uzza was linked to springs and vitality. Controlling water, therefore, was not just technical mastery, it was a form of communion. This sacred dimension is etched into the stone of their greatest monuments. At the Great Temple, one of the largest architectural complexes in Petra, excavations have revealed an intricate water system integral to its function. A series of underground channels fed large, sunken ritual pools within the temple precinct. These were not for bathing or drinking in a mundane sense. They were likely for ceremonial purification, for the ablutions required before participating in sacred rites. The water's journey from a distant spring through hidden conduits to emerge within the temple walls would have been seen as a guided divine blessing, a literal channeling of sacred power into the heart of their communal worship. Similarly, the massive cistern carved into the base of the towering monastery facade may have served a dual purpose. While it provided essential water storage for those visiting the high place, its prominent location suggests it also played a role in ceremonies, perhaps as a source for libations or ritual cleansings under the watchful gaze of the carved edifice. Inscriptions found throughout the city often credit the construction of water channels and reservoirs not just to kings or wealthy citizens, but to the priesthood, underlining the religious oversight of this most vital infrastructure. This fusion of technology and faith answered a fundamental human need in an unforgiving landscape. It transformed the practical struggle for survival into a shared spiritual endeavor. Annual festivals likely coincided with the precious arrival of rains, turning the recharging of cisterns and the flooding of wadis into events of communal thanksgiving and ritual. This leads us to a pivotal reflection. When a Nabatean king commissioned a new dam or a grand fountain, he was doing more than improving civic utilities. He was demonstrating a unique, divine-sanctioned authority. By presenting himself as the intermediary who could command the very essence of life, who could make the gods' blessing flow on demand, he cemented his political power in the most profound way possible. The control of water was the ultimate performance of kingship, a continuous miracle that sustained both the body and the soul of Petra. The engineering was brilliant, but its true power lay in this deeper current, in making the people believe their survival was a sacred covenant, maintained by those who walked between the earthly and the divine. Petra's water channels were more than mere utilities, they were the city's original architects. This leads to a fourth foundational principle, that the hydraulic system was the blueprint for urban planning itself. To understand Petra, you must forget the idea of a city built first with plumbing added later. Here, the water came first. The very layout of streets, neighborhoods, and monuments was dictated by the flow of the life-giving channels. The city was not simply supplied with water, it was organized around it, growing like a living organism along its artificial streams. The most powerful example of this is the colonnaded street, the main thoroughfare of ancient Petra. Today it appears as a wide, ceremonial avenue lined with the stumps of columns, but running directly beneath its stone paving was one of the city's major water conduits. This was not a coincidence. That channel was the street's reason for being, its hidden spine. Public fountains, known as nymphea, were positioned at key intersections, fed by branch lines tapping directly into this subterranean flow. These were not just decorative, they were vital public utilities where people could gather fresh water. Further along, the channel would feed into the city's bathhouse, a complex requiring a constant supply for its heated pools and steam rooms. Archaeologist Dr. Shahar Rababey's research into Petra's urban form reveals how this integrated planning created distinct zones of water accessibility. The areas closest to the main channels and major cisterns became the prime real estate, home to public institutions, elite residences, and bustling marketplaces. Neighborhoods further up the slopes, while still connected by smaller branch lines, would have had a more limited supply, often reliant on household cisterns filled by rooftop catchment. This gradient of access subtly influenced the city's social and economic geography. The reliable public water supply along the main arteries supported commerce and community life, while the private cisterns of the hillside villas provided autonomy and security for the wealthy. The system created a kind of hydraulic democracy for those along its main lines, ensuring no one in the city center was far from a source, while also allowing for private reserves. This planning demonstrates a profound foresight. The Nabateans did not just build a city in a desert, they grew a city from its water. Every decision, from where to place a temple to where to widen a street, was made with the channels in mind. The infrastructure was not buried out of sight. It was the foundational layer upon which all else was constructed. Petra functioned as a single, integrated hydraulic organism, where the boundary between the network that sustained life and the life it sustained simply did not exist. The water's path was the city's destiny. Even the most brilliant dam has its limits. When the desert's fury reached a certain peak, when the Wadi Musa swelled beyond any capacity to be gently redirected, the Nabateans had a final, breathtaking answer. They gave the flood a new mountain to pass through. Just beside the remains of the great curved dam at the sixth entrance, hidden in plain sight, is a square-cut opening in the cliff face. This is the entrance to the Diversion tunnel, a masterstroke of defensive engineering that required them to think not just like builders, but like surgeons operating on the living rock. To step inside is to leave the world of facades and monuments behind and enter the gritty, determined reality of their work. The tunnel stretches for over 80 meters, a straight, dark passage through solid sandstone. In the dim light, the walls are not smooth, but bear the unmistakable, rhythmic scars of countless hammer and chisel blows. The air is cool and still, carrying the profound silence of deep earth. The ceiling is low enough that you must often crouch, a physical reminder of the immense effort required to create this space, not for people but for water. This was not a natural fissure they widened. It was a corridor they invented, hewn entirely by human labor. Teams of workers, using iron tools and relentless perseverance, would have carved this channel from both ends, meeting in the middle with astonishing accuracy. The true genius, however, lies in what you cannot easily see, the floor. The entire tunnel was carved with a precise, consistent downward slope. This gradient was the critical calculation. It had to be steep enough to ensure that floodwater, once admitted through a sluice gate from the main dam, would flow swiftly and completely through the mountain, carrying debris with it to prevent clogging. Yet it could not be so steep that the water gained destructive, erosive speed inside the tunnel itself. Getting this slope wrong by even a small degree could render the entire project useless, either allowing water to pool and stagnate or causing the tunnel to erode and collapse from within. The exit of the tunnel delivers the water safely into a side canyon, far away from the vulnerable city entrance. This single feature transformed their flood defense from a mitigative system into a permanent solution. It acknowledged a simple, terrifying truth: some floods are too powerful to control, so you must give them a dignified, non-negotiable exit. The tunnel is the ultimate symbol of Nabatean foresight, a project that required thousands of hours of backbreaking labor for an event that might only happen once every few years. It represents a civilization thinking in centuries, willing to reshape the very bones of the landscape not for glory, but for quiet, enduring security. In that dark, silent passage, you hear no echoes of kings or caravans, only the ghost of a calculated whisper, a promise to the mountain itself that when the rage comes, there is now a better way through. The true test of a water system lies not in its grandest dams, but in its smallest cracks. In the shadow of a towering cliff, an archaeologist's trowel once scraped against something unexpectedly smooth. It was a fragment of plaster lining an ancient channel, its surface still glassy and intact after 2,000 years of desert sun and sporadic floods. This unassuming material was the silent guardian of Petra's entire hydraulic dream, a microscopic masterpiece of Nabatean innovation. Without this specialized waterproof plaster, every channel would have leaked, every cistern would have drained, and the city's precious lifeblood would have seeped back into the thirsty earth long before reaching its destination. The Nabateans were not just builders of stone, they were alchemists of mortar, creating a synthetic skin that could defy the desert's constant demand. Their recipe was both simple and sophisticated. Analysis reveals it was a carefully calibrated mix of slaked lime, local sand, and a crucial secret ingredient, crushed ceramic aggregate. This was not just any crushed pottery, it was specifically selected terracotta, ground into a fine powder. Materials scientist Isabel Rubin explains the chemical magic at work. The lime acted as the binder, but the crushed ceramic, rich in silica and alumina, triggered a pozzolanic reaction. When mixed with water and lime, these fine particles created new, interlocking crystalline structures as it cured, forming a matrix far denser and more durable than lime plaster alone. It was, in essence, an ancient form of concrete, engineered for one specific purpose: to be impermeable. The result was a lining so effective that it could reduce water loss through seepage to almost negligible levels, a non-negotiable requirement when every drop was counted. But the genius of this plaster did not stop at its initial strength. Rubens' research points to an even more remarkable property, a degree of self-healing. As water slowly moved through the plaster-lined channels, it would carry minuscule amounts of dissolved lime from the matrix itself. If a tiny hairline crack developed from settling or temperature stress, this lime-saturated water would seep into the fissure. There, as the water evaporated or the chemical conditions changed, the lime would recrystallize, effectively sealing the crack from within. This passive repair mechanism meant the system could maintain its integrity over decades with minimal maintenance, a vital feature for infrastructure spread across miles of inaccessible cliff faces. It was a material designed for longevity, for outlasting the generations who mixed it. We often marvel at Roman concrete, and rightly so, but the Nabatean plaster was a different answer to a different environmental challenge. Roman concrete, famous for hardening underwater, was designed for harbors and massive vaults. The Nabatean blend was engineered for extreme aridity and thermal cycling, for resisting the relentless expansion and contraction of desert heat, and for maintaining a perfect seal against porous sandstone. Their innovation was born of absolute necessity, a deep, practical chemistry forged in the crucible of scarcity. This humble plaster, smoothed by hands long gone, was the unsung hero that made the grand vision possible. It turns our gaze from the monumental to the microscopic, asking us to consider where the true foundations of a civilization might lie, not always in the stones we see, but in the hidden chemistry that holds everything together. Yet the stone channels and plaster linings were not designed for a static world. The story of Petra, like all great human stories, is ultimately one of change. For centuries, the Nabatean system was a triumph of adaptation, but it existed within a delicate balance between human ingenuity and environmental reality. The city's eventual decline presents a haunting question: did the water system fail, or was it asked to do the impossible? A pivotal moment arrived in the year 363, when a powerful earthquake struck the region. Historical records and archaeological evidence confirm this event caused catastrophic damage. The shockwaves would have shattered delicate plaster linings, collapsed sections of tunnels, and dislodged the carefully placed stones of diversion dams. In an instant, the meticulously maintained network was fractured. But to see the earthquake as the sole cause is to miss the deeper, slower-moving forces at work. A system built for resilience can recover from a single disaster if the people and the knowledge to rebuild it remain. The true unraveling likely began with a shift in the very climate the system was designed to master. Recent paleoclimate research, studying mineral deposits in caves across the Levant, provides a startling new chapter to this story. These natural archives, stalagmites that grow layer by layer over millennia, record subtle chemical changes in rainwater. Their analysis suggests that during the late Roman and early Byzantine periods, the region experienced significant climatic variability. There is evidence of prolonged periods of reduced rainfall, a trend toward greater aridity, and a shift in the patterns of the vital winter storms. For Petra, this meant the fundamental premise of their engineering was being rewritten. The flash floods they relied upon may have become less frequent but more violent when they did arrive, or the long dry spells between rains may have stretched beyond the capacity of even their vast cisterns. The system was built for a specific hydrological rhythm, and that rhythm was changing. This climatic pressure intersected with profound social change. By the 4th century, Petra's role as a premier caravan city had diminished with the rise of sea trade routes and shifting political powers. Economic decline would have strained the civic resources and collective will needed for the endless, labor-intensive maintenance the hydraulic system demanded. Clearing silt from dams, replastering channels, and repairing quake damage required a mobilized, invested community. Historians debate whether social upheaval and a loss of specialized knowledge made the city vulnerable before the climate shifted, or whether the increasing unpredictability of water undermined the social contract itself. It becomes a difficult cycle to untangle. Did a lack of water cause societal strain, or did a strained society lose the ability to manage its water? The likely answer is a confluence, a perfect storm of environmental and human factors. The Great Earthquake of 363 was not a death blow to a healthy city, but a devastating injury to an organism already under deep stress. The magnificent system did not fail in its function. It was simply overwhelmed by a scale of change it was never meant to counter. Its genius was in managing the desert's known extremes, not in adapting to a fundamental, long-term alteration of those extremes. This invites a sobering reflection on the nature of resilience. Even the most brilliant human engineering exists in a dialogue with a dynamic planet. The story of Petra's water is not a tale of a single mistake, but a poignant lesson in complexity, reminding us that the greatest systems we build are sustained not just by stone and plaster, but by the enduring will and wisdom of the communities that tend them. The Roman aqueduct stands as one of history's most recognizable icons of engineering, a soaring arcade of stone marching across a valley in a straight, imperial line. It represents a philosophy of water mastery built on scale, permanence, and overwhelming force. The Romans moved water on a continental scale, conquering distance with gravity-fed channels that could stretch for 50 miles or more, bringing mountain springs directly to the heart of their cities in a continuous, abundant flow. Their engineering was a statement of power visible for all to see. Now hold that image in your mind and contrast it with the hidden world of Petra. Here there are no towering monuments to water, only the whisper of it moving through cracks in the cliff. This is not a story of conquering distance, but of an intimate, desperate negotiation with a single, unforgiving place. Where Roman engineering was centralized and monumental, Nabatean engineering was distributed and invisible. It was a network, not a line. Instead of one massive aqueduct, Petra relied on hundreds of small catchments, countless hidden channels, and a decentralized army of cisterns. This fundamental difference reveals two brilliant but opposing answers to the same human need. The Roman system was designed for abundance and display, to supply vast public baths, fountains, and latrines as a testament to civic order. The Nabatean system was designed for scarcity and survival, to capture, defend, and hoard every possible drop. As engineer and archaeologist Andrew Wilson notes, Roman hydraulic engineering was often about volume and political statement, while Nabatean engineering was an exercise in adaptation and extreme conservation. Each approach was perfectly calibrated to its environment. The Roman model thrived in temperate regions with reliable water sources at a distance. It was a system of import. Petra's model was born in a hyper-arid desert where no distant source existed, only the sporadic, violent bounty of local storms. It was a system of amplification and defense. To judge which was more advanced is to miss the point. The sophistication lies in the fit. The Roman aqueduct is a brilliant solution to the problem of distribution. But Petra's hidden network solved a more complex puzzle, one of capture, storage, flood mitigation, and distribution all within a single, chaotic basin. It managed water not just as a commodity, but as an unpredictable force of both creation and destruction. In its context, the Nabatean system represents a pinnacle of ecological engineering, a lesson in working within severe constraints rather than overwhelming them. It asks us to reconsider what true engineering genius looks like, not always in the monuments that dominate a skyline, but sometimes in the unseen, resilient systems that allow life to whisper where it should not exist at all. The channels we see carved in stone represent the final act, the construction. But before a single chisel struck, a far more profound puzzle had to be solved. How did they know where to build? Across a vast, rugged terrain of over 80 square kilometers, How did the Nabatean engineers pinpoint the exact location of every hidden spring, the most efficient path for a channel down a cliff face, or the perfect spot for a dam to slow a flood? They possessed no topographic maps, no satellite imagery, no drones to survey the land from above. Their master plan was drafted not on parchment, but in a deep, intimate dialogue with the landscape itself, a form of knowledge that feels almost mystical to us today. The first and most vital source of this intelligence was time, measured not in years but in generations. The Nabateans were not newcomers to this desert. They were nomadic pastoralists who had traversed these canyons and plateaus for centuries before ever founding a city. Their survival depended on knowing where a trickle of water emerged after a rain, which Wadi bed held moisture just beneath the surface, and how the shadows fell on a cliff face to preserve a patch of snow. This was not engineering data, it was lived experience, a cumulative oral encyclopedia of the land passed from elder to child. A grandfather might show his grandson a specific, unremarkable crack in a rock where 2 seasons after a good rain, you could always find a damp patch for the goats. That crack, generations later, might become the starting point for a carved channel feeding a neighborhood cistern. Their initial survey work was likely this, a lifetime of observation becoming institutional memory. Yet for the grand city-scale systems, this ancestral knowledge would have been methodically tested and expanded. We can envision teams of surveyors perhaps following major rainstorms. Their tool was observation. They would walk the ridges and wadis, watching where water naturally pooled, where it carved new paths, and most importantly, where it disappeared into the ground. A place where floodwater consistently sank into a gravel bed, rather than raging over it, signaled a prime location for a groundwater recharge dam. A persistent green stain of algae on a north-facing cliff, even in the dry season, betrayed a constant seep they could tap. This patient, rain-chasing methodology allowed them to create a mental hydraulic map of incredible accuracy. There is also the intriguing possibility of technological influence. To the east, in Persia, engineers had perfected the Qanat system centuries earlier. This involved digging a gently sloping underground tunnel back into a hillside to tap a groundwater aquifer, then channeling that water for miles to the surface. The surveying skill for a Qanat is extraordinary, requiring an understanding of subterranean water tables and the ability to maintain a perfect gradient through miles of tunnel, often dug from a series of vertical shafts. While no classic Qanats have been found at Petra, the core concept of long-distance, gravity-fed conveyance and the sophisticated surveying mind set it required may have traveled along the trade routes. Whether through inherited wisdom, meticulous storm tracking, or borrowed concepts, the result was the same. The Nabateans achieved a cognitive mapping of their water resources that was as precise as any modern digital model. It forces a humbling reflection. We live in an age of instant data where satellites can measure groundwater depletion from space. But have we lost a more fundamental literacy, the ability to read a landscape with our own eyes, to understand its whispers and clues? The true foundation of Petra's hydraulic miracle was not stone or plaster, but a forgotten way of seeing, a deep knowing of where the water would hide, long before they ever asked it to flow. The most resilient systems are not single threads, but a woven fabric. This brings us to a fifth brilliant principle embedded in Petra's design, a philosophy of decentralization and redundancy. Modern network theory teaches us that a system with a single point of failure is fragile, while a distributed web of interconnected parts is robust. The Nabateans, in their fight for survival, engineered this exact principle into the stone. Their water network was not a single, vulnerable pipeline like a Roman aqueduct, but a dynamic, multi-path web. If one channel was crushed by a rockfall, if a cistern became contaminated, or if a spring temporarily dried up, the system could adapt. Water could be rerouted from another catchment, drawn from a different cistern, or supplied by an alternative branch line. This was resilience built into the very architecture. We see this clearly in the lifeline of the Sikh. The main channel carved along its floor was not the only source. Higher up the canyon walls, smaller run-off channels were carved to capture rainwater directly from the cliff faces themselves. These acted as independent tributaries, feeding into the main flow or into separate cisterns carved into the rock. They provided a backup, a secondary source that could supplement the supply if the primary spring-fed channel was compromised. This redundancy extended to storage. The city did not rely on one massive reservoir. It had a distributed network of hundreds of cisterns, from grand public pools to humble household tanks. A failure in one did not mean catastrophe for all. It simply shifted the burden to the others. Systems scientist Dr. Yanir Bar-Yam, who studies how complex systems survive stress, would recognize this as a classic strategy for creating robustness. By designing multiple pathways and backups, the Nabateans ensured that no single event, whether a localized landslide, a breach in a dam, or even deliberate sabotage, could completely sever the city's lifeline. The system could degrade gracefully, losing capacity in one area while maintaining function in others, buying precious time for repairs. This intelligent design philosophy prevented catastrophic, city-ending failure. It turned potential disasters into manageable maintenance challenges. For centuries, this decentralized web allowed Petra to endure the inevitable shocks of its environment, from quakes to droughts to the simple wear and tear of time. In an age where we often build monumental, centralized infrastructure, Petra stands as an ancient testament to a different kind of strength, one found not in a single unbreakable chain, but in the enduring, adaptable power of the net. The story of water in Petra is also a story of power, written not in grand proclamations but in the quiet privilege of a private reserve. While the public channels and fountains sustained the community, the city's elite engineered a separate, more certain kind of access for themselves. High on the cliffs adjacent to the magnificent facades of the royal tombs, archaeologists have uncovered a different kind of monument, one of pure utility and profound social statement. These are the royal cisterns, vast, bell-shaped chambers carved deep into the bedrock, far larger and more elaborate than any household tank. Their location is no accident. Perched above the city, they were filled not just by rooftop rain, but by dedicated channels that diverted water from the very same public sources flowing below. This was hydraulic privilege made permanent in stone. Imagine the assurance this provided. While the populace relied on the shared rhythms of the public network, subject to its fluctuations and maintenance, a royal or wealthy elite household possessed its own guaranteed reservoir. This water could sustain private bathhouses, irrigate secluded courtyard gardens filled with fragrant vines and fruit trees, and ensure a household's cleanliness and comfort regardless of the season's scarcity. An inscription found near a major water channel commissioned by a wealthy citizen does not simply record a name, but boasts of the construction of a water system for his private estate. Such a declaration was a public performance of both piety and power, demonstrating an individual's capacity to command the ultimate resource. This introduces a crucial political dimension to the technological marvel. The king, as the ultimate patron and guarantor of the entire hydraulic system, occupied a uniquely powerful position. By funding the great dams and main conduits, he presented himself as the provider of the communal lifeline, the benefactor upon whom all life depended. Yet, by also controlling the distribution and permitting these private diversions for the elite, he reinforced a social hierarchy. Access to water became a gradient mirroring status. The public fountains represented a basic, shared right to survival, while the private cisterns and gardens symbolized a higher tier of security, leisure, and autonomy. This duality reveals the human complexity within the engineering triumph. The system that bound the community together with shared dependence was also a tool that could delineate and enforce social boundaries. It prompts us to look beyond the pipes and plaster to see the subtle currents of influence they carried. Was the steady flow of water through the sick not just a miracle of engineering, but also a continuous, quiet demonstration of who held the keys to life itself? A faint, pale streak on a sun-baked cliff face is the desert's whisper of a secret. To the untrained eye, it is just a discoloration in the rose-red sandstone, a meaningless stain of mineral deposit. But to an archaeologist kneeling in the dust, tracing its path with a gloved finger, it is a vital clue. This is the ghost of a water channel, a calcite signature left behind over centuries by the slow, steady seepage of a long-vanished conduit. The investigation into Petra's hydraulic heart is a modern detective story, one that began not with satellites, but with simple, patient observation. The first modern witness was the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt in 1812. Disguised as an Arab scholar, he was led through the sick and beheld the treasury, but his journal notes reveal an engineer's eye. He meticulously recorded the remnants of terracotta pipes and carved channels, the first outsider to document that Petra's true wonder was not just its facades but its functionality. For over a century after, the spectacular tombs and temples drew all the attention, while the water system lay in fragments, a puzzle scattered across 80 square kilometers of rugged wilderness. Piecing it together required a new kind of archaeology, one that followed the water. Teams from institutions like Brown University and the German Archaeological Institute began to walk the wadis not as tourists but as hydraulic detectives. They mapped every low stone wall that could be a dam, every carved notch that could be a sluice gate, every unnatural groove in a rock face. They realized the landscape itself was the blueprint, and each feature was a word in a forgotten language of survival. The detective work accelerated with technology. Ground-penetrating radar, a device that sends pulses into the earth, began to reveal the shape of things hidden below. Archaeologists could now stand on a flat, featureless terrace and see the ghostly outline of a massive, buried cistern on their screen, its dimensions clear, waiting silently beneath their feet. Even more transformative has been the use of three-dimensional laser scanning, known as LiDAR. Mounted on tripods or even flown by aircraft, these scanners fire millions of laser points at a surface, building a hyper-precise digital model of the entire terrain. With LiDAR, researchers can virtually strip away vegetation and surface clutter to see the bare topography. Suddenly, the subtle gradients of ancient channels become glaringly obvious, and the full, interconnected network of catchments and conduits across a whole mountainside reveals itself as a single, intelligible system. This technology is not just about mapping what is visible, it is about revealing intention. By analyzing the laser models, hydrologists can run water flow simulations, testing how the Nabateans intended floodwaters to move across their terraces and through their diversion tunnels. They can calculate the capacity of a cistern or the precise slope of a channel to the fraction of a degree, confirming the astonishing accuracy of the original engineers. This detective story is far from over. Every season, new discoveries are made. A collapse in a canyon wall might expose a previously unknown plaster-lined conduit. A careful excavation in a domestic quarter might uncover a perfectly preserved household cistern, its waterproof lining still intact. Each find is another piece of the mosaic, reminding us that our understanding of this ancient masterpiece is still evolving. The true scale of their achievement is still coming into focus, hidden in plain sight within the very stone we walk upon. It prompts a quiet wonder: how many other whispers from the past are etched into the landscapes around us, waiting only for someone with the patience and the tools to listen. The sound of water was a luxury they engineered into their daily lives. This brings us to a sixth and defining principle: the seamless integration of water management with architecture and aesthetics. In Petra, the line between a utility and a work of art simply did not exist. The system was designed not only to sustain bodies, but to delight the senses and elevate the spirit, proving that function and splendor were two sides of the same carved stone. Nowhere is this fusion more public than in the Nymphaeum, the grand public fountain that once graced the colonnaded street. This was not a simple spout in a wall. It was an ornate, multi-story facade, likely adorned with columns, statues, and intricate carvings. Water would have cascaded from multiple outlets into a broad, shallow basin, creating a visual and auditory spectacle in the heart of the city's main thoroughfare. Yet its beauty served a deeply practical purpose. The Nymphaeum was a critical water distribution node. The constant flow prevented stagnation, and its prominent, accessible location meant everyone, from merchant to traveler, could easily collect fresh water. It transformed a mundane necessity into a civic event, a place to gather, socialize, and witness the abundance their engineers provided. This philosophy of integration extended to the most sacred journeys. The arduous climb to the high place of sacrifice, a ceremonial platform atop a mountain, is lined with hundreds of steps carved into the cliff. Flanking these stairs, archaeologists have found carefully carved channels. These were not an afterthought. They served a dual role, managing rainwater runoff to prevent erosion of the sacred path, while also perhaps providing ritual purification water for those ascending. The very act of climbing toward the divine was accompanied by the engineered whisper of water, merging the practical management of the environment with the solemnity of the ritual. Finally, consider the garden pools within temple complexes like the one near the Great Temple. These were serene, reflective basins, often surrounded by colonnades and planted with lush vegetation. Their primary function was aesthetic and psychological, creating a cool, tranquil oasis of contemplation amidst the desert stone. But they also served a physical cooling function, their evaporation helping to moderate the microclimate around the temple. The sight of a carved sandstone facade mirrored perfectly in still water would have been a powerful symbol of harmony, of the natural and the man-made in perfect, reflective balance. The Nabateans engineered an entire sensory experience. The sound of water trickling through a shaded sick, the sight of a garden flourishing in a stone courtyard, the cool touch of mist from a fountain, these were all deliberate enhancements. They proved that their mastery was not merely about survival against the desert, but about crafting a life of profound beauty within it. Their greatest statement was that infrastructure could be sacred, and that the most vital systems could also be the most beautiful. The silent, steady flow of water through a channel is a delicate equation in motion. Too steep a slope, and the current accelerates, scouring the channel walls with erosive force, tearing apart the very conduit meant to carry it. Too shallow a gradient, and the water slows, staggers, and finally stagnates, becoming a breeding ground for algae and disease. The Nabateans carved their channels with a slope so consistently perfect it defies the assumption of guesswork. They were solving for an invisible ideal, a mathematical sweet spot known only through a profound understanding of fluid dynamics, achieved long before the term was ever coined. This was not abstract theory, it was applied intelligence etched into the landscape with chisel and hammer. Their goal was a uniform, laminar flow, a smooth, consistent movement where the water travels in parallel layers with minimal turbulence. Achieving this across miles of uneven terrain, using only hand tools and human sight, is perhaps their most understated marvel. So how did they do it without levels or theodolites? The likely answer lies in a beautifully simple tool, the water level. Imagine a long, hollow reed or a wooden trough filled with water. The surface of that water, at rest, will always find a perfect horizontal plane, regardless of the uneven ground beneath the trough's ends. By sighting along this natural horizon, or by using marked poles at a distance, a surveyor could establish a level reference line across a canyon or along a cliff face. From that baseline, they could then calculate a consistent, gentle drop. Experts like hydrologist Charles Ortloff suggest they may have used a standard unit of decline, perhaps a drop of one hand's width for every 10 paces of channel length. This empirical rule, refined over generations of trial and observation, would have produced the remarkably consistent gradients we still measure today, often around 1 or 2%. This precision was the heartbeat of the entire system, ensuring that water moved with just enough purpose to stay fresh and clear, yet with enough restraint to prevent self-destruction. It was a mathematical mind applied to a flowing problem, a quiet testament to their ability to see the world not just as rock and sky, but as a series of solvable physical relationships. This mathematical thinking extended beyond the channels to the very source of the water itself. To build a cistern of a certain size, or to trust a dam to hold back a flood, they needed to answer a fundamental question: how much water are we actually dealing with? They had to become masters of estimation, calculating volumes on a grand scale. First, the catchment. The basin of Petra forms a natural bowl of over 80 square kilometers. When a storm arrived, they needed a rough idea of how much rain that bowl could collect. While they wouldn't have used our modern units, they understood the relationship between area and depth. Through long observation, they knew that a rainstorm that wetted the palm of your hand might produce a certain depth of water across the high plateaus. They could then conceptually multiply that depth by the vast area of the catchment to grasp the potential volume of the ensuing flood. This informed the scale of their dams and diversion tunnels, built to handle not just any flow, but the probable maximum flow from a major storm event. Similarly, the design of a cistern was an exercise in volumetric calculation. A bell-shaped tank carved into bedrock wasn't a random cavity. It was a storage vessel with a known capacity. By establishing a standard unit of measurement, perhaps based on the human body like a cubit, they could calculate the volume of a cylindrical or rectangular cistern during its construction. They knew how many days of supply it would hold for a family or a neighborhood. This allowed for strategic planning, ensuring storage capacity matched population needs and the expected intervals between rains. This practical geometry transformed uncertainty into manageable data. They were quantifying their world, turning the chaos of weather into numbers they could build upon. It represents a form of engineering literacy that feels strikingly modern, a data-driven approach to survival. They weren't just praying for rain, they were budgeting for it, calculating its potential yield, and designing their infrastructure to capture and allocate every precious drop according to a long-term plan. Their constructions are the physical evidence of a society that thought in flows and volumes, that saw the desert not as an empty void, but as a complex system of inputs and outputs waiting to be balanced. No clay tablets survived detailing Nabatean hydraulic formulas. No engineer's manual was found tucked beside a chisel. Their entire body of technical knowledge was an oral and practical tradition, passed down through apprenticeships and lived experience. The evidence of their mathematical mind, therefore, is not in a library but locked in the stone itself. We can reverse engineer their intelligence by measuring what they built. When archaeologists use modern lasers to map a diversion channel, they can calculate its exact slope to a fraction of a degree. The consistency across miles is the proof. When they measure the dimensions of a cistern and account for the rate of seepage and evaporation, they can deduce how many people it was designed to support. The precision is the manuscript. This empirical knowledge, refined over centuries, became a kind of embodied programming. A master stonemason didn't need to recite a formula. He knew in his hands the exact angle to chip the rock to maintain the flow. A surveyor knew by the look of the land where the water would want to go and how to gently persuade it otherwise. This deep, generational literacy in the laws of nature allowed them to effectively program the landscape. They inscribed their logic into the wadis and cliffs, creating a system that operated with automated reliability. Once constructed, the network functioned according to the immutable laws of gravity and fluid dynamics they had so cleverly harnessed. The floodwater would always take the path of least resistance through the diversion tunnel. The channel would always guide water from the spring to the city center. The cistern would always fill before the terrace overflowed. This is why their work feels so eerily modern to us. It operates on principles we still use today, the same physics that govern our own municipal water systems. In the absence of written plans, the city itself became the document, a three-dimensional blueprint of a brilliant, practical mind. It asks us to expand our definition of literacy, to consider that some of humanity's greatest equations were never written down, but were instead carved into the living rock, where they still perform their silent, flawless calculations to this very day. The ghost of Petra's genius does not end at the city's canyon rim. Its true legacy flowed outward, carried along the very trade routes that made the kingdom wealthy, seeding a revolution in how to live within the desert's harsh embrace. To see this, we must travel northwest into the stark, beautiful expanse of the Negev Desert. Here, far from the rose-red cliffs, other Nabatean cities like Avdat and Shivta rose from the dust. These were not grand capitals, but vital way stations and agricultural centers along the incense route. And in their foundations, we find the same hydraulic signature, a scaled-down blueprint of Petra's mastery. At Avdat, perched on a high plateau, the challenge was even more extreme, with rainfall barely reaching a few inches per year, yet the Nabateans flourished. They built a sophisticated system of dams and channels to capture flash floods from the surrounding hills, directing the water into a network of cisterns carved beneath the city streets. Most strikingly, they transformed the barren slopes below the city into vast agricultural fields using the same terrace farming techniques perfected at Petra. Low stone walls stretching for miles across the landscape captured every trickle of runoff, creating strips of fertile soil where wheat, barley, and even grapevines could take root. This was not an isolated experiment, it was a replicable model. Each new Nabatean settlement became a node in a spreading network of arid land intelligence, a cultural package for survival that included specific knowledge of masonry, plaster mixes, and watershed management. The technology was portable because the principle was universal: work with the desert's rhythm, never against it. This knowledge proved so resilient that it outlasted the Nabatean kingdom itself. When Byzantine monks later settled in Shivta, they did not demolish the ancient water systems, they inherited and maintained them. The great cisterns and farm terraces became the foundation for their own communal life, their monasteries and churches sustained by Nabatean engineering. The diffusion continued into the early Islamic period, where traditional water management practices across the region, from the underground Qanat tunnels of Persia to the rainwater harvesting techniques of Jordanian villages, often echo the core Nabatean philosophy. The specific plaster recipes might have been forgotten, but the intuitive understanding of catchment, gravity flow, and conservation lived on, absorbed into the region's collective wisdom. This raises a profound question about the nature of innovation. Was Petra a singular flash of brilliance that eventually faded, or was it a brilliant hub whose most valuable product was not spice or silk, but an idea, a set of solutions so effective they became woven into the very fabric of life in the arid Middle East? The evidence in the silent fields of the Negev suggests the latter. Petra's greatest export may have been a simple, enduring truth that in the desert water is not found, it is forged through patience, observation, and a deep partnership with a formidable land. Your footsteps echo on the worn stone path through the Sikh, a sound that has reverberated here for 2,000 years. But you are not just walking through a canyon, you are walking on top of a buried river. Look carefully at the base of the left-hand cliff, just where the shadow meets the path. There, carved directly into the living sandstone, is a smooth, linear groove, now dry and filled with wind-blown dust. This is the main artery. It runs almost the entire length of the Sikh, a constant companion to your ore. In places, you can see where the Nabateans covered it with flat stone slabs, a simple but effective roof to shield the precious flow from the evaporating sun. Higher up, smaller, fainter channels branch off, climbing the rock face like delicate veins. These fed cisterns carved into the cliffs for the guards or residents who lived in the heights above the passage. Every step of that dramatic approach was, for the ancient citizen, a walk alongside the city's pulsing lifeblood. The sublime beauty was a side effect of profound utility. The path opens and the treasury's facade explodes into view, a moment of breathtaking spectacle. But lift your eyes above the famous columns. Look at the cliff face towering over the monument. Up there, almost invisible from below, are the openings to several large cisterns. Why place massive water tanks directly above their most ornate creation? The answer lies in practical necessity and possibly sacred ceremony. The treasury itself, many archaeologists now believe, was not a treasury at all, but a monumental tomb or a temple. Carving and decorating such a facade required years of work by teams of artisans. They needed water constantly for mixing plaster, for drinking under the desert sun, and for the sheer dust of their labor. Those cisterns above were the on-site supply, filled by channels from the surrounding highlands, ensuring the builders were never delayed by thirst. Later, once the monument was complete, the water may have served a ritual purpose. Imagine ceremonies at the base of this awe-inspiring facade, where priests could draw water from those high reservoirs for purification or libation, making the sacred liquid flow quite literally from the mountain itself. The spectacle and the utility were always intertwined. Leaving the treasury, you descend toward the heart of the city along what was once the grand colonnaded street. Today, it is a wide, sandy track between the stumps of columns. You are walking directly over the city's second great hidden artery. Buried beneath the sand and the later Roman paving stones runs a major covered conduit. This was the main distribution line for the downtown area. At regular intervals, vertical terracotta pipes would have risen from this buried channel to supply the public fountains that once graced the street. The side streets you pass were not laid out at random. They followed the logic of smaller branch lines tapping into this central supply. The entire urban plan was an expression of the water grid. Where the street widens into a public square, you might notice a depression in the ground, the last hint of a great nymphaeum, where water cascaded over carved statuary into a broad basin. This was the social hub, the place to see and be seen, all made possible by the invisible flow beneath your feet. This transforms a visit from passive sightseeing into an active archaeological scavenger hunt. You are not just looking at beautiful ruins, you are learning to read a landscape engineered for survival. That faint groove in the wall, that odd square cut in a cliff high above a tomb, that strangely linear depression running through a field of ruins, these are all syllables in a lost language of water. When you start to see them, Petra reassembles itself in your mind's eye. The city ceases to be a collection of disconnected monuments. It clicks into place as a single, integrated machine for living, a magnificent apparatus powered by the careful channeling of a fleeting resource. Every step you take connects you to the ancient minds who shaped this place. They left their signature not only in the grand facades meant to impress the gods and kings, but in these humble, functional lines carved with patient, purposeful hands. To walk Petra with this vision is to hear the desert's old, cleverest whisper, the sound of ingenuity flowing silently beneath the sand. The magnificent channels and dams were not a monument that could be built and forgotten. They were a living, breathing entity that required constant, vigilant care. This introduces a seventh and final foundational principle, one that moves beyond engineering into the heart of society itself, maintenance as a cultural imperative. The true marvel of Petra was not just its construction, but its centuries of sustained operation, a feat that demanded an entire social structure dedicated to its upkeep. Imagine the silent, ceaseless work that kept the city alive. After every flash flood, teams of workers would have to descend into the wadis to clear tons of silt and debris from behind the diversion dams, ensuring their capacity for the next storm. The plaster linings of thousands of meters of channels needed regular inspection and repair, a skilled task requiring knowledge of the specific mortar mix. Sluice gates had to be operated with seasonal precision, and the vast network of public cisterns required cleaning to prevent contamination. This was not casual, occasional labor. It was a critical, organized, and likely specialized civic duty. Historians suggest the existence of a dedicated corps of maintenance experts, perhaps a hereditary guild or a class of skilled workers entrusted with this vital knowledge. We might think of them as the hydrological of Petra, the keepers of the flow. Their work ensured the system did not just exist but functioned flawlessly across generations. We see echoes of this social organization in other arid land cultures. In Spain and the American Southwest, traditional irrigation communities known as acequias have operated for centuries on a principle of shared responsibility. Water rights are tied to the maintenance of the communal ditches, with every user contributing labor according to their share. This creates a powerful social contract where the community's survival is literally built upon mutual participation. Petra almost certainly operated on a similar, though more complex, scale. The system's longevity for centuries speaks to a deeply ingrained cultural commitment, a collective understanding that the masterpiece was not a one-time achievement, but a continuous, dynamic partnership with the environment. It was a lesson in long-term stewardship written into law, labor, and daily life. This shifts our perspective profoundly. The real wonder is not the stone, but the society that chose, year after year, to clear the silt and mend the cracks. It asks us a quiet, challenging question about our own world. What great systems do we build today that are not just marvels of construction, but are sustained by a culture equally committed to their care? The desert has a way of spinning its own legends. Over centuries, whispers grew around Petra's water, tales told by later Bedouin guides and embellished by wide-eyed travelers from distant lands. One persistent story spoke of a vast, hidden river flowing deep beneath the city, a secret subterranean ocean the Nabateans had magically tapped. It is a romantic idea, the kind that paints them as fortunate discoverers of a pre-existing miracle. The truth, however, is far more impressive because it removes the magic and reveals the makers. Archaeology finds no evidence of a mythical underground river. Instead, it maps a network of human intelligence applied to the water that was visibly, if unpredictably, present. The Nabateans were masters of surface capture and managed groundwater, not finders of fantastical sources. They did not stumble upon a secret spring, they engineered thousands of them from the collective runoff of an entire landscape. Those small seepages in the cliff face, the seasonal pools in the wadi beds, the scant rainfall on the high plateaus, these were their raw materials. Their genius was in aggregation, in gathering these scattered, feeble whispers into a single, commanding voice. Later traditions sometimes attributed these works to jinn or ancient giants, a common way to explain the inexplicable scale of antiquity. By attributing the water to supernatural forces, these stories unintentionally diminish the human achievement. Demystifying the technology does not make it less wondrous, it elevates it. To know that there was no magical river, only rain and flash floods, is to understand the magnitude of their ambition. They looked at a landscape defined by absence and saw not what was missing, but what could be assembled. This critical perspective shifts our respect from awe at a lucky discovery to profound admiration for a sustained, generational project of observational science and gritty perseverance. Theirs was a victory of patience and applied physics, a testament to what a civilization can build when it chooses to listen closely to the world, not for whispers of magic, but for the practical rhythms of a resource waiting to be understood. The ancient system's greatest enemy today is not drought, but a familiar deluge arriving under unfamiliar conditions. A modern flash flood in the Wadi Musa is a different kind of beast, amplified by changes far beyond the canyon walls. When a storm cell stalls over the highlands now, the water that funnels into the sick carries more than sand and stone. It carries the consequences of our own time. Upstream, the modern town of Wadi Musa has expanded, its buildings and paved roads covering the natural ground that once absorbed rainfall. This creates rapid, intense runoff, sending larger, faster volumes of water into the ancient drainage system than it was ever designed to handle. The result is a dangerous surge that now threatens not only the fragile archaeology but the safety of visitors walking the narrow sick. The water rises with alarming speed, scouring the base of monuments and accelerating erosion in ways the Nabateans meticulously engineered to prevent. Climate change introduces a further layer of unpredictability, with models suggesting the region may experience fewer but more intense rainfall events, precisely the pattern that stresses these ancient defenses most. Beyond the immediate fury of floods, a suite of slower, silent crises accumulate. Centuries of silt, left unchecked because the maintenance crews vanished long ago, have filled many diversion channels and settling basins, reducing their capacity. Seismic activity, a constant geological threat in the region, continues to destabilize plaster linings and crack cisterns. Pollution from vehicles and nearby development introduces contaminants that ancient stone and plaster were never meant to filter. Perhaps most insidiously, modern tourism infrastructure, from pathways to retaining walls, can inadvertently alter the natural drainage paths the Nabateans so carefully calculated, causing water to pool where it should flow or erode where it should be protected. The masterpiece is under a multi-front assault, both from the forces it was built to master and from new ones its creators could not foresee. In response, a new generation of guardians has arrived, armed with lasers and traditional trowels. Teams from the Petra Archaeological Park and UNESCO work not as builders, but as forensic conservators and hydrologists. Their first task is comprehensive documentation, using three-dimensional laser scanning to create a perfect digital twin of every channel, dam, and cistern. This model allows them to understand the original hydraulic logic and diagnose points of failure. We spoke with a conservator on site who explained their delicate philosophy. Our goal is not to rebuild what they built, but to understand how it functioned so our interventions can protect it. Sometimes the best action is to clear a blocked 2,000-year-old spillway to let water follow its intended path again. Other times it is to install a discrete modern drain to handle excess runoff that the ancient system cannot. It is a dialogue between millennia where modern engineering defers to ancient wisdom, using minimal, reversible techniques to ensure the system's survival. This work creates a profound and urgent link between past and present. Understanding the Nabatean system is no longer just an academic exercise, it is the key to physical preservation. By mapping how water was meant to move through the site, conservators can make smarter decisions about where to place a new visitor center, how to route a footpath, or where to reinforce a cliff face. The ancient blueprint becomes a modern conservation guide. This ongoing battle highlights a sobering truth. The engineering that allowed Petra to flourish is now the very thing most vulnerable to neglect and change. The same water they mastered now tests our own resolve to be stewards. It raises a pressing question for our era as we face our own environmental shifts. Will we look at the solutions etched in this stone as mere relics or as a living manual for resilience? The future of this desert wonder may depend on how well we learn to read its oldest, most vital lines. Beneath the familiar pathways of Petra's city center lies a hidden map we have only begun to trace. While we have mapped the main channels and major cisterns, the full subterranean network remains a profound mystery. How many more bell-shaped reservoirs are sealed beneath the flagstones of the colonnaded street or under the courtyards of unexcavated homes? The potential scale is staggering, suggesting a capillary system even more intricate than our current models show. Beyond storage, the logic of daily distribution poses another puzzle. We understand the gravity-fed flow, but not the precise protocols that governed it. Was there a scheduled rotation for neighborhoods, a system of water rights tied to family lineage or social status, or appointed guardians who managed the sluice gates with ceremonial precision? The absence of written administrative records leaves us inferring social structure from stone alone. Perhaps the most tantalizing frontier lies in the surrounding landscape. Satellite imagery has revealed faint geometric lines stretching across distant slopes, hinting that the agricultural terrace network may have been 5 or 10 times larger than the areas we have physically studied. These ghostly patterns suggest terraces that fed not just Petra, but supplied caravans and satellite communities across a vast region, a desert-scale breadbasket engineered from rock and runoff. To answer these questions, a new toolkit is emerging, one that allows us to see through stone without lifting a trowel. Imagine a technology that uses cosmic rays to create an X-ray image of a mountain. Muon tomography does exactly that, detecting subtle variations in density as these subatomic particles pass through solid rock. It could, in theory, reveal the shape and location of every hidden cistern and block tunnel within an entire cliff face, mapping the city's vascular system in 3 dimensions from the outside in. Meanwhile, advanced drones equipped with multispectral and LiDAR sensors are already revolutionizing landscape archaeology. They can detect minute differences in soil moisture and vegetation health, revealing the buried outlines of ancient field walls and irrigation channels invisible to the human eye. These tools promise a non-invasive census of the entire hydraulic landscape, showing us the system not as isolated fragments, but as a complete, functioning whole. The ultimate discovery, however, would be a cache of the Nabateans' own words. While no extensive archives have been found, the potential persists. A sealed chamber in a tomb, a forgotten administrative building, or even a pottery sherd inscribed with water allocation records could transform our understanding overnight. Such a find would give names to the engineers, detail the civic laws of water, and perhaps even record the prayers spoken when the first flood of the season was successfully captured. It would bridge the gap between the engineering marvel and the living, breathing society that maintained it. This forward-looking perspective is crucial, for it frames Petra not as a solved equation, but as an ongoing conversation. Each technological leap offers a chance to recover more of their lost wisdom, to listen more closely to the whispers still trapped in the stone. The story of Petra's water is unfinished. Every new scan, every drone flight over a barren slope, writes another line in a manuscript we are only now learning to read. What we ultimately seek is not just to admire their masterpiece, but to recover the manual they left behind, a guide to resilience written in water and stone, waiting for us to understand its full depth. The narrative of Petra is ultimately a story of balance, a dialogue between human ambition and the unyielding laws of the desert. We have traced the path of a single raindrop from a furious flood in the highlands to a quiet, life-giving trickle in a shaded garden, witnessing the principles that made this possible. The Nabateans did not conquer their environment with force, but engaged with it through profound observation, mastering the art of peak flow attenuation, building decentralized and redundant networks, and weaving water management into the very fabric of their spiritual and social life. Theirs was a hydraulic symphony where every dam, channel, and cistern played a distinct, vital part in a composition that sustained a civilization for centuries. This achievement stands as a quiet rebuttal to the idea that sustainability is a modern invention. It is instead an ancient and sophisticated art, a testament to building with durability as the foremost principle, just as Vitruvius later prescribed. Petra challenges our modern perspective, asking us to look at harsh landscapes not as problems to be overcome, but as partners in a delicate, intelligent negotiation. It demonstrates that resilience is found not in monumental, centralized systems, but often in distributed, adaptable networks that honor the specific rhythms of a place. The legacy of those rose-red cliffs is more than a breathtaking ruin. It is a timeless lesson in ingenuity. It reminds us that the greatest human triumphs are often those that work in harmony with the world, turning scarcity into abundance and threats into foundations. What ancient wisdom hidden in plain sight might still hold the key to our own future challenges? If this journey into the heart of a desert masterpiece has captivated you, consider subscribing for more explorations into the mysteries of our past. We would love to hear your thoughts. What piece of ancient technology or lost knowledge inspires you the most? Share your reflections in the comments below.